Hello, Bekka here. Today I am going to take you through my process of what to do with herbs once you get them home. So let's get started. So those that are here for the first time, I'm Bekka Laurent, and I'm here to empower you with knowledge of a natural health lifestyle. And today I'm going to take you through my process of processing herbs once I get them home, and specifically Goldenrod. And those that have caught my video from a couple of weeks ago, this is kind of in addition to that video, or I should say in addition to me processing the herbs that I gathered from that video. Make sense? All right, now that I've rambled on, anyway, I collected some goldenrod and I've hung it up and allowed it to dry. And today I am going to do, starting my tincture creation. What you need is, of course, you need your herb, and to create a tincture, you need it to at least dry. It doesn't have to be crackly dried, but you don't want it to have water on it. So hanging it up and allowing it to just dissipate the water and the excess moisture out of the herb for a couple hours or so, that's where you want to start with your tincture. Well, my herbs have been hanging up for over a week, so they're nice and crackly. So you need your herb, and then you want a jar with a lid, which I just use mason jars, but if you have like a old pickle jar or sauce jar, something along those lines, you can use plastic too, but I don't like using plastic with this because it can leach out the chemicals in the plastic. But you might want to use a plastic lid. With a canning lid, if it does have any damage in the bottom of the lid, it'll start making the jar rust. You can take some cellophane, put it over the top, and then put the lid on. You can use a piece of muslin or cheesecloth and put over the top, and instead of using the lid, you can use the ring. You can use oh my goodness, there's so many different things. Like a coffee filter and a rubber band, put it over the top, and bam, there you go. So however you want to do it, that's what you need. You need a container. You need something to keep the dust and the insects out. You also need some vodka or some alcohol, which I use vodka because it doesn't have a distinct taste to it, so it's not overpowering your herbs. And you want it 100 proof or at least 80 proof or better. 100. You don't really need to get anything over 120, so you definitely don't need something like Everclear, something along those lines. Why spend all that money on that when you really don't need it? Some cheap vodka will do the trick. And technically, you can make tinctures with a glycerin, non-alcoholic type. What is the fun in that? But it is possible. I just like doing it old school, easy way. Why have a lot of ingredients and product laying around? So I always just use cheap vodka. And then you'll need a tincture jar or something to be able to get or have a little bit of tincture and then get the tincture out. So something like a pipette, along those lines. And you might want a funnel, and then you're going to want something to label with, whether it is a sticky label, you'll need a pen, or, possibly even printing it out. You could use tape, so along those lines. Something to identify what you have. And as far as that, it can be a Sharpie written across the jar or across the lid, and it can be even a piece of paper, a napkin with something written on it, and it rubber band to the jar. Just something so you know what is inside your jar. Okay, so that is basically what you need for a tincture. So I'm going to move the camera around to where you can actually see the desk for our next process. So as you can see, I have my goldenrod, and it is nice and crispy because it has been hanging up for a while. And I even grabbed a little tea towel that I'm going to put down on my desk just to make things a little easier to clean up, because this is like a crispy Christmas tree. You know, it's going to get everywhere if you don't keep it contained. So, and with a tea towel or a piece of muslin, piece of fabric, you know, something along those lines, I'll show you a quick, fun way to take your plant material off of the stems. So with a goldenrod, you can use the flower, and I would suggest to use the flower, especially if you are wanting to make it as if it is a remedy for allergies. Flour is good, but if you're making a tea out of this, you can or not use the flour. It's just up to you. It's not going to hurt either way unless you specifically don't want to use the flour. So I will show you a couple of ways to process your plant, especially if it is dry. You can just crunch it. And as you can see, well, let's see, just one crunch, and you can see I've got quite a bit of leaves there. So this way will actually get some aggression out of you. Yeah, so if you're having a bad day, you know, that person that flipped you off in the car that passed you, you know, so on and so forth, you can just get that aggression out, and look at there. Oh, I'm feeling so much happier. Yes. All right, but you don't have to do that if you don't want to. Another easy way of pulling the plant material off of goldenrod is just holding it up and then running backwards on the plant. And that is the easiest way, especially if you're using fresh goldenrod. It is just to take it backwards on the plant. Oh, and it smells so good too. So you can do it that way. You could actually use these small stems if you wanted to in your teas or even your tincture. So I am going to process this, and while you have some nice music to go with it, and I will be back when this is processed. Alright, so now you can see that I have pretty much gotten all of the leaves off of the goldenrod. And you might notice that I do have a few leaves and a few flowers on the goldenrod. I subscribe to the thought of you need to be grateful for the plants that is given to you. And you also need to be grateful enough to give a gift back and give this back to earth. So I don't like stripping it down to nothing. I like giving this back. Now, whatever that means to you is up to you, but I will either put this in the compost, I will throw it out in a quiet part of the yard to possibly regenerate, but I do give back to earth what she gives to me. So that is what all of this is for. But you will also see that I did save some of the tops and a few of the branches of the goldenrod. And then I have quite a few leaves and flower on my towel here to go into a tincture. So the next step is to get a jar and or a container like I'd already talked about. You want to make sure that this container is dry and not just rinsed off and dried with a towel type dry. No, it needs to be bone dry. Like it has sat there. There is no water or moisture in this because you don't want the moisture to combine with the plant and create a good environment to create mold, mildew, you know, things along those lines. And that's why I like hanging my plants up to dry to where they are almost crispy or almost crispy. And then, okay, so you have your jar. You need to grab your alcohol. And if you're going to use a funnel, you'll need a funnel. Now, I like doing it simple, easy peasy. There are different formulas for different herbs on the ratio of alcohol versus plant material and blah, 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 blah. Oh, this so scientific way. It's almost as if they're trying to keep us out of our medicine. This is our medicine, and it doesn't have to be that complicated. What the rule that I follow is half the container and then double half the herb and double the liquid. And I'll show you what I mean. So I will take my goldenrod stems and I will break them up and just kind of combine them to where it doesn't create so much airspace in the jar, but just kind of stuff it up into the jar. You know, you don't want it too terribly tight to where it creates air pockets and places that it's going to be hard for the liquid to go. But you do want it full enough to where you're not wasting your alcohol, if that makes sense. And what I normally do is I will pick a jar and I will put half of it herbs. So with this, I'm going to stuff some of the herbs up in there until I feel that it is, full enough. And let's see. I think that's pretty good. Let me come around here. See, that's about as full as I feel it. And it's about half the jar. And then I will top it off. I will fill the whole jar up with alcohol. So it's your intentions is to cover all of the plant material and have no air pockets, no water pockets in your plant. And as you're feeling, if you think that you could put more plants in there, go right ahead. Just as long as you're able to cover it up with your alcohol. And like I said, half the plant material, double the liquid. So there we go. I will put the lid on and I'll give it a good shake just to make sure that all the plant material is going to cover up when it is shaken up. And I do have some plant material above the liquid, and the liquid has gone down below the lip of the jar, so I'm going to fill it up to the lip. And it's just that easy. So you have the start to a tincture. Now, with this tincture, there are multiple ways of doing a tincture. You can cook it slowly, which I don't like to do because if you get the heat too hot, then you're killing off the constituents that you are wanting in your tincture. What I like to do is do it the old-fashioned way of, I have my jar, I put it in the window. Like, I like putting it above the kitchen sink because I am by the kitchen sink quite a bit, you know, throughout the day. And then throughout the day, when I think about it, I will just give this a shake. And the reason you're doing that is you are getting the liquid to flow through the plant material and kind of crunching it or creating flow across it to pull that those constituents out. And also doing it, you are whatever plant material might be up at the top, it is getting circulated into your liquid to where it's not the same plant material all the time at the top, creating an environment that is conducive to mold. So shaking it up quite a bit, you're less likely to get mold. Now, as I had mentioned, plastic, I actually have some plastic lids for my my canning jars, and I will be switching to that lid just out of ease of grabbing the jars and getting ready for this video. I already had a lid on this. There we go. You know, I got lazy and didn't feel like looking for that plastic lid at the moment. But it is a specific lid that is made for canning jars. And if that's something that you're looking for, then it is available. Okay, so the last thing you want to do with your tincture before you put it up is you want to make sure you identify it. I don't know how many times I have created something, oh, well, that's goldenrod. And then a couple of weeks later, a couple months later, oh, I've got this tincture sitting there. I wonder what it is. I wonder how long it's been there. So you always want to label it. So I'm going to label it goldenrod. And you want to put the date. And today's date is 23rd of October. And the reason you want to put the date is you want to know how long your tincture has been sitting there steeping. With plant material like this, like softer leaves and the flowers, you can have this done within 2 weeks. I've actually had tinctures that had been sitting there for months and ended up decanting them, and they did extremely well. But I can have this ready in 2 weeks just by sitting in the windowsill. It's getting the heat from the sun and then allowing to cool in the at night to where it is assimilating perfectly. It's almost as if it was designed that way. But anyway, so I like putting it in the window. So let me set this aside for a minute, and we will go through the process of processing it when it's done. I happen to have some goldenrod that I put out September 15th, and it is ready to decant. And how do I know it's ready to decant? Well, it may be hard to see in the video, but the liquid is rather dark, and the plant material is rather pale compared to what it was. So, like I said, I keep it easy peasy. So that is my indication that it is ready. I'm going to take a tea towel, and I'm going to take a funnel, and I'm going to take a jar. And I use this jar just because I do reenactments. So this would be something that I would be able to carry with me and talk about tinctures. That's the only reason I have this old-fashioned looking fancy-dancy jar. But doing tinctures, once you decant it, which decanting, all that means is taking the plant material out. Fancy word, isn't it? But once you decant it, you want it in a darker location. And that's why they normally recommend jars that are colored jars, which I have this one that I will take take a smaller amount, and this is what I would carry with me in my purse, or have it out to have it available as needed when needed. So I do use a tincture jar, but this jar, if you're going to use something that is see-through, then you need to store it in a closed environment, a darker environment, whether it's in a box. I'll use boxes that are used for canning. I will have quite a few tinctures in that to where it's all pushed together. It's kind of protected from the sun. You can put it in a cupboard, or put a towel over it, however you want to do to protect it. And then I have a funnel. Since this jar has a smaller lip, I will be using a funnel, and then I use a tea towel, just something to collect the plant material to make it easier to strain the liquid from my plant material. So this one, like I said, this one is one that I started last month. And when I pour it, you might see that it's very dark. It's like a very dark yellow. Which, did you know that goldenrod is actually a good plant to dye with? So if that's something that you're interested in, try experimenting with dyeing with the goldenrod flower. It does come up with a beautiful yellow that will be slightly less yellow than it is here once it's dried. And then I'm going to take the plant material, and then I'm going to strain the plant material. Now, in this portion, I like to give a story about me when I first got into herbalism. I had read where the herb rosemary is good for lowering blood pressure. And at the time, my husband was dealing with a little bit of blood pressure issues. So I'm like, hey, let's try rosemary tincture for hubby's blood pressure. So I had rosemary in a jar like this, and it had been simulating for a long period of time, several weeks. And I went to pour, the liquid into the jar, and, I had a lot of the plant material still in the jar. So I just take my hands and start dishing it out into my funnel to squeeze out the juice, and I went down. My husband, he came to rescue me. Oh, so sweet. And my husband was a medic at one time for over 10 years. So, of course, the first thing he's going to do is check my my pulse. And he said the first time he checked it, he did not feel my pulse. And he was wondering what was going on. But, through time, I started stirring, and he checked my pulse again, and it had come back to normal. And what I have contributed to this is I have natural low blood pressure. Which is normally hovers 100 or even slightly below, and it's something that I have. My mother and my grandmother both have it as well, so it is something that is hereditary. So it is normal for us. And messing around that herb, that concentrated herb that is known to lower blood pressure, what do you think happened? Yes, it lowered my blood pressure. And luckily, I was healthy enough to where my body kicked back in and came back to normal really quickly. But that could have been something very detrimental to me if I wasn't in the health and shape that I was in at the time. So I tell that story not to scare you, but to help you be mindful that this stuff that you're using, that Yeah, you think it works. It does work. And whenever you have a concentrated form, you do need to have precautions or take precautions and not be a goofball like I was and just dive on in. So you need to be thinking what you're doing as you're doing it. So as I talked about, so if you don't recall what the goldenrod was good for, then I do have a video that I will leave in a card, whatever direction it goes. I'll leave a card up here to take you to that video so you can learn what I use goldenrod for. But this is the tincture. Now, what do we do with an herbal remedy after we put it in a new container? We label it. In this one, I'm just going to make it easy peasy for myself, and I'm going to label it goldenrod. And I will be creating a fancier label for that for my herbal demonstrations. For my herbal demonstrations, I usually have more of a printed label just to make it easy and make it look like it would be something from the time period. So until I'm able to print up that label, I just wrote goldenrod on this with a Sharpie. And it's good enough. Now, if you're going to use a Sharpie and use it for semi-permanent use, especially around liquid, then you're going to want to use some tape to tape over it, because with liquid it will pull, especially alcohol, it will pull the name off of the jar. So just keep that in mind. But that is just a temporary for me until I can print up a label. So those that are ready to start down your path to natural health, go check out bekkasplanet.com. I have some great resources for you. I will see you there, and until then, get healthy, be happy, and herbal on. Bye. Take the confusion and overwhelm out of your life and design your natural health lifestyle. Start it today at bekkasplanet.com.